Hey guys, welcome to the Evil Geniuses Bleed Blue podcast. This is the podcast where I talk about everything Evil Geniuses. Um, this episode is going to be pretty different in terms of the structure of the episode. It's pretty much entirely going to be focused on the management, but the management bleeds into pretty much every esport, obviously. And so from there, we're going to take tidbits and pieces of information from the recent articles that have been released and whatnot, and we're going to apply that to the other esports that EG is in because obviously I think the biggest news that's come out has been the situation with Danny, and that's obviously what we're going to talk about. But I think it's important to notice that this isn't just something that's only affecting the League of Legends team. It's quite clearly affecting the Counter Strike team. It's quite clearly affecting the decision making in why the Dota 2 roster was the South American Dota 2 roster was signed. It definitely, in my opinion, plays a role into why the Valorant team is mostly comprised of young players, or at least was in the past, right? Comprised of young players that nobody's really heard of before. Obviously people have heard of them now, but at the time, EG was not very big in Valorant, and I think it's important to give some context for that because I think it's what I've learned out of this whole Danny situation is not just how it's affecting Danny or how it could affect different players in the future, but also how this is a cultural thing within the org and how it has been affecting the decision making in this org in every esport they've competed in for multiple years. And I'll get to it, but I don't. Well, it could change, but I think it's something that well, it's going to need more attention, and as much attention as it can possibly get. And so I'll talk about that at the end. But I do want to preface and say there most likely is not a Counter Strike section to this, a specific Counter Strike section where we're going to talk about, the future of the roster, and specific things about the game in Counter Strike, because I haven't quite yet received a reply from Current, but I think his internet is still out. I might be wrong, and frankly, um, I don't feel I feel like this should be an episode dedicated to the org, dedicated to the management within the org, how it affects the other esports, because this is a serious problem. Um, Obviously, I don't think I could. That's an understatement. It's massively important. Um, I'll just say it right now. This is probably, and I understand there's other organizations that we don't know the full truth behind many other organizations, right? So this is entirely speculation. But this might just be one of the most rotten organizations in the history of esports in terms of how it's currently being run, um, which is mind blowing. Um, I've always been critical of Evil Geniuses. If you don't believe me, go back to when I started the podcast. You can watch those episodes. I was critical of the marketing team. I was critical of the decision making, um, the management, and I think this is just kind of like finding out all this information has just been like a wow. Like it's not only worse than I thought, but now we understand the reasons why, right? And so, look, not to pat myself on the back or anything, but I hope you guys, when you saw the video or the podcast episode where I really delved into that idea that corporations are not families, and that when they say they're a family, they mean that they treat employees like human beings, and how there's a very distinct difference between the two, and implying that you're a family, it's like you can't sit there and on one end say, oh, we're a family. That means we're different from everybody else because we treat our employees like family. um, you can't say that that's massively important and a big distinguishing factor within your organization. And at the same time, when I say, hey, when they say they treat employees like family, what they really mean is they treat people like human beings. And then you go, yeah, but that's not that different. No, it's completely different. They're two completely different things. Um, I know because I work in a workplace environment. Simple as that. If you don't understand it, you probably haven't worked in a workplace environment, and it doesn't need to be an elaborate one. It just needs to be a basic one. And once you work a job for yourself, you'll come to realize, like, look, not that you're just a number on a spreadsheet, but to some degree you are. And a good corporation will treat you like a human being. They'll be understanding of your situation, but at the end of the day, it does come down to your production. It does come down to whether or not you can do your job. Um, and so when Nicole says stuff like, "Oh, we're a family," when the org says stuff like, "Oh, we're a family," not only is it important to take a grain of salt with that, but as you can clearly see out of all of these sources who have come out with all of these terrible, horrifying stories of what's happened with this organization, you can clearly see that she was lying to your face and you believed it. And I told you not to believe in it, and you still believed in it. And because you just, I don't know. Like it's like you guys, I can't stress how much I can say this. Don't believe in an org's values because they create merch that supports a certain value. Like, e.g., supporting the LGBTQ plus community by creating merchandise for that community is not supporting that community. It's cash grabbing at that community. That's what that is. It's advertising yourself to a market of people and really pushing on it so that people think that you care about those values and then you can create a profit off of it. That's what it is. If you want any proof, where's the news about them contributing to any type of LGBTQ plus cause? You can't find one. I mean, the most they've done is sign Sonic Fox and I don't know, um, having a VCT Game Changers team that's not even that good. I guess that's it. You know what I mean? Like there really isn't a whole lot there. Um, so this is just the kind of stuff I'm talking about, and I've been warning about, and I've been saying some of this stuff. I've been giving out the warning signs for months, not because I knew this information, but because you can infer some of this information, right? You can infer that things aren't being done correctly. Now, I never knew it was to this extent. I mean, this is horrifying things, horrifying. Um, but yeah, so this episode is going to be mostly focused around the management. And I apologize if that's not something that you're interested in, but I think it's extremely imperative that we talk about it, um, because this does affect, as much as you want to say, well, I just want to watch the team play. Well, I just want to watch the team play. Well, this affects how they play. This affects how they play. This affects the roster decisions that get made. This affects the coaching decisions that get made. It affects everything. And so you can live in your own little bubble where you just want to focus on the games. That's fine. As a fan, you can do that. There's nothing wrong with that. But you can't then just turn around and say, well, I don't understand why they don't do this and this and this and this and this when you don't want to get involved in the management side. In my opinion, you don't get to complain about why certain decisions are made when you don't want to be interested in why those decisions get made in reality, and only focus on the game itself. So yeah. So kind of how I'm gonna break this down, right, is because there's been so much stuff that's come out. I mean, so much stuff. I mean, you guys got to remember we didn't do an episode last week. Um, so there's been a lot of criticism, a lot of information. I hope it continues because I think that's the only way we'll see change, um, if any. Which look, while I don't expect there to be change, I hope and pray there will be change because I don't think I've seen an organization get bashed into the ground as much as EG has been the past couple of weeks, and I really hope it continues, which sounds weird coming from a fan, but you have to understand, guys, my perspective as a fan, and I've said this from day one, is I want EG to be the best. I want them to be signing the best players, signing the best talent. I want them to be a top fucking team. And I want them to obviously have a good culture and treat people like human fucking beings. And the only way that that could ever happen with the way that the org is currently run is if enough pressure gets put on them to force changes. Because as well, and you know what, I'll touch on this a little bit at the end where I talk about kind of like a call to action on what I want fans to do with this information, or even if you're not a fan, of EG and you're just a fan of esports or anything in general, right? Like I think it's important to bring this up and to really hit home, um, just how important this is, because that's the only way. Public opinion does matter. At the end of the day, it really does, especially with stuff like this. Um, so I think where we're going to start is we're going to start with the Danny situation. And I do want to preface that I understand Richard Lewis's article came out, and he is definitely the most reputable source out of the two articles that I'm going to be discussing, which is the Richard Lewis article, and Arsh Goyal also did an article on Medium. And I like his article, I do, but I don't know as much about Arsh Goyal. He's made some edits to the original document since he originally released it, and so I would say give his article a grain of take it with a grain of salt. Um, I believe most of it because a lot of it you can see the parallels between what he says in his article and what Richard Lewis says in his article and what Thorne says in his video, and things that I've heard from, or not I personally, but things that have been released in public, not to public knowledge, regarding the CS:GO players, the you know it's just the stuff that all from all the other sources, right? Like that we've heard just ridiculous stories about. I think it's very similar to what Arsh mentions in this article. And so I believe it kind of 90-10. That's kind of where I sit on it. I'm 90-10 on it because there have been some changes to the article, and I do trust Richard Lewis and Thorne more than I trust this guy. Um, no shade at him. It's just the track record that Thorne and Richard Lewis have is just unbelievable. Super, super consistent. 100% accuracy, pretty much. I mean, I don't think I can even. There's really nothing you can even say to tarnish their reputation. When it comes from a journalistic standpoint, you may not like them as people. You're fine to have that opinion, but you can't deny their incredible, incredible journalistic abilities. I'm personally a big fan of theirs. Um, and I've been watching and listening to their stuff for a long, 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 long time. Um, but I understand that some people aren't fans of them. But you need to understand that you know um, their track record is unbeaten. So I do trust them more than I trust Arsh Goyal. But I do think that Arsh Goyal's article, it echoes the same things that we were hearing from Thorne and from Richard Lewis, and some of the hints that people were kind of throwing out there. People like Monte Cristo were throwing hints, right? Like this is just stuff that I think um, we it's very similar. It corroborates these other things, right? So I do want to say I just do want to say I'm gonna read Arsh Goyal's article that he made because it has the most details, specific details in it. Um, I'll probably try to pull up Richards as well. Let's see if I can pull up Richards real quick because obviously his article is great as well. It also talks about the Counter-Strike team a little bit, um, which is cool. So let's see here. Let's pull up Richard Lewis. Let me try to grab his article as well so we can read his. He just came out with some big news on Counter-Strike 2 or Source 2, which is pretty freaking awesome. We'll probably talk about it in the next episode because it is a big deal. It does affect how the game is going to be played and whatnot. Um, but let's see. I apologize. This is taking me a this is taking me an extra second here to find it. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. We got it pulled up. So, you know what? Actually, let's read Richard Lewis's article first because it came out chronologically first, right? And then we'll move into um and we'll kind of talk about that, and then we'll move into the following article pretty quickly afterwards. And we'll discuss that. So let's see here. Articles. You know what? I'll just do Richard Lewis article, and I'll just kind of do this. Awesome. Okay. I was originally going to do the other article first and then kind of talk about things, but let's do Richard's first. Sources: Evil geniuses failed to care for one of their prodigies. I'm not going to read this entire thing because Richard's article came out quite a while ago. And again, I think a lot of it is going to come from uh, Arsh Goyal's because again, the sentiments are very similar. Um, and Arsh Goyal goes into a lot more detail when it comes to the specific events that happened. And so I think in that way, I can talk about what Arsh is saying, and I can also talk about what Richard was saying, right? And so from that perspective, it might be a bit easier. I mean, honestly, a lot of this stuff is in both articles, right? Um, so I do want to mention this when it comes to Richard's article. The one thing I think the biggest thing that the biggest thing I wanted to mention about this, right, about Richard's article, because as I'm reading this and rereading it, kind of getting the summary again, a lot of this is going to be mentioned in Arsh Goyal's article with a little bit more detail. So I think we're going to read his, and I will read that article in the full thing. I'm obviously going to put Richard and Arsh's articles in the description. So please, 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 if you have not read it, read both of them. I encourage to read both of them. They're both fantastic. I'd say read Richards first because chronologically that's kind of how things were released. But absolutely read both of these. They're fantastic. Um, and yeah, but I think the most interesting part for me with Richard's article, not only about the Danny details, but was this excerpt, right? Another former staff member of Evil Geniuses that we interviewed told us they weren't surprised at claims management didn't prioritize the well being of players. During their time there, they saw similar disregard paid to the CSGO team. This is the quote from the source. During COVID, in the middle of the pandemic, they sent the CSGO team to Serbia, where no one wore a mask, and then had them retroactively sign terms like they had instructed them to take safety measures from the beginning, the source explained. That's bullshit. They put the team in that position, and basically the players all got COVID from it because they skimped on paying for good accommodation and other basic things. So, the reason why I'm specifically mentioning this part, and I will mention it again when I talk about how how all of this news is affecting all of the other esports that EG competes in, because I think people are too narrow-minded in terms of only focusing and being tunnel visioned on the LCS portion of the story, and they're not looking at how this is clearly affecting every other team that they're using, right? Or even not using, like the Rocket League team, which I'll get into as well. Um, and but I think what's important to notice about this, right, is just not only the disregard of care, that there's the lack of care of taking care of players, but on top of that, um, the cost saving measures that are being taken place by Evil Geniuses consistently throughout the board, which is quite strange when you consider. I'm sorry, I'm going to close my Discord, which is quite strange when you consider the fact that they've decided to have in multiple esports rosters with 10 plus man rosters. Um, Very strange that you're going to do both at the same time. But it's weird because you know what? I'll get to it in a bit. I'll get to it in a bit. But let's. I know I didn't really talk about Richard's article, and I am not, definitely not throwing shade at his article because his article is fantastic, and I would believe his article 100% pretty much. Um, he's pretty spot on when it comes to this stuff. And so, but what I think the reason why I'm gonna mostly talk about the other article again to reemphasize this is because a lot of what's said in Richard's article is reemphasized and reaffirmed in this article by Arsh Goyal. It kind of it acknowledges what has been going on, or it acknowledges all the things that Richard was saying, and then it also elaborates on that a lot more. Um, so that's kind of where we're at, right? Um, so yeah, so kind of talking through. Let's go through Arsh's article. Sorry, that was a tongue twister for me. Um, and just kind of go through the whole story and I'll make comments as we get through them, right? To kind of point out things that I think are important, point out things that I think are necessary to touch on, and things that to remember for when I talk about how this affects the other esports, right? And you'll also see how this clearly corroborates a lot of the things that Richard Lewis was talking about in his article. Again, if you haven't read his article, go read it in the description. I highly encourage it. It's a fantastic read. So, incompetence and mismanagement to the full story of Danny and Evil Geniuses. For those who are unaware, Danny is the AD carry, or was the AD carry, I should say, for Evil Geniuses. He started in the summer split, I believe, of 2021, and was there throughout the entirety of 2022. He was known as the Prince of Pentakills. He had incredible highlights while he was in the LCS. He was a very, I don't want to call him one-dimensional player, but he had a very weak laning phase with a very strong team fighting ability. And in 2022, EG's entire offense was focused around Danny's playstyle because they would feed him resources. And even though the laning phase was difficult, EG was so good at team fighting that it just wouldn't matter. They would typically pick scaling comps that would allow Danny to get stronger as the game progressed. And so as long as they were in the game still, Danny could always come up with something, and the team fighting was so strong on that roster that they could always find a way to win throughout the team fights. Because in the LCS, it's notorious for teams taking bad team fights, for teams mismanaging end of game situations. And so, if you are a really strong team fighting team, you can take advantage of the other rosters in the LCS typically. And so Danny was a fantastic young player who clearly showed talent. Clearly, if he had developed, could have been one of the best AD carries, if not the best AD carry North America's ever seen. And he was an endemic North American talent, which made him extremely valuable. Because if you don't know, the LCS has the LCS has, I believe it's two import slots. And so if you can get a very talented and endemic North American player into your roster, it is 100% worth it. Not to mention the fact that obviously, if there's a North American player, a lot of North American fans are going to cheer for the young North American players. And so that was something that EG exploited massively throughout the spring split, even though really the only North American talent that they were like quote unquote developing was JoJo Pion and Danny. The rest of the roster, Vulcan was experienced. Um, Vulcan was already very experienced. Inspired was the MVP of the LEC, the European League, and Impact is a world champion. So whatever. But the point being, Danny was a fantastic talent. He's a quirky guy. But it's very explainable as to why he acts the way that he acts. Um, and frankly, he could have been one of the best guys. I mean, he genuinely could have been one of the best. And to see EG get power hungry the way that they did over this was disgusting and abhorrent, in my opinion. Um, so let's get into the article. I think where we're going to start. I think where we're going to start is with the context. So, context: spring split and MSI. For those who aren't aware, I do need to preface this. Some of you maybe are just hearing this stuff for the first time. The way that the LCS is structured, or League of Legends in general is structured, is you have is at the start of the year, beginning of the real calendar year, you have the spring split, and then that lasts for multiple weeks. You have the playoffs of the spring split, and whoever wins the playoffs of the spring split, who wins, there's only one team that can win the playoffs of the spring split. Whoever wins that split goes to what's called MSI, which is an international tournament. I believe it's called the Midsummer Invitational. I might be wrong on that, but I believe the Midsummer Invitational, and it's an event. It was held in Korea last year. I don't know if it's always held in Korea, but it was held in Korea last year, and it's one of the few. There's only two international events in League of Legends, and so it's very important for teams to go to this event. In particular, it was important for Evil Geniuses if they were able to, if they could do it right. Winning Spring Split was massive for them because players like JoJo, Pion, and Danny are so young. They could really use that extra experience being playing against other extremely talented players like the players in Korea, the players in China, right? Those are the kind of players you want to play against and gain that experience and learn how to play the game from, right? Because in North America, you're only so limited on what you can practice with. Um, it's not like Counter Strike in that regard, right? And so, you know, Well, and I mean that in the sense of in Counter Strike, if you want to go take a boot camp over to Europe, you can do it whenever, well, not whenever you want, but you can do it a lot more frequently than when you're in League of Legends, where you kind of your only shots are MSI and Worlds. So, anyways, you go to MSI. It's a long event, very taxing, lots of games. But you have MSI, and then you have a very if you go to MSI, you have a very short break before the summer split, the second season of the LCS starts. Um, so you have the second split, the summer split, and at the end of the summer split, you have summer playoffs. And the top three teams from summer playoffs go to Worlds. And in the way that it was done last year, it was the top two teams in the playoffs of the summer split that went directly to the group stage of Worlds, and then the third team, which was Evil Geniuses, had to go down into the well, I don't think it was called the Gauntlet, but it was kind of like the I can't the term isn't coming to me, but kind of like the last qualifier, or the I guess you could call it the gauntlet, and it was held right before Worlds started. So yeah, that's where the third place team went, which ended up being Evil Geniuses, but Danny wasn't playing. So let's go all the way back to the beginning, Spring Split and MSI, for context. The story of Danny's retirement is defined by an attachment to his brand value by upper management and a persistent laziness from certain members of staff of EG. Simply put, they weren't able to recognize the warning signs and were willing to risk his health to preserve their newfound freedom or fandom. Not freedom. Uh, as early as the construction of EG's 2022 roster, Danny's mental health was a consideration within the team. Uh, Impact, who had played with Danny in 2021, was, per a source, vocal in his concern for Danny's stability in a competitive environment. However, Danny came up within EG's talent development pipeline, great use of pipeline, it's EG's favorite word, and had already turned heads as a human highlight reel in 2021 and continued to do so in 2022. So general manager Andy Barton, and head of coaching staff Peter Dunn pushed to retain the young prodigy they had brought to the LCS stage. Not to mention that executives were eager for his brand value as a nascent superstar. Nascent meaning, growing into his role, very, proficient, superstar, on the up and up. In hindsight, Impact's concerns were well placed. As Lewis mentions in his article, EG's leadership was fully aware that Danny is autistic and claimed to be invested in maintaining his comfort and mental health every time his family emphasized it. However, EG categorically failed on that front, which would become abundantly clear later in the year. In the spring, Danny was never consistent in scrims. Per a source on the LCS team, it took some time for the other players to adjust to Danny's learning curve. He had skyrocketed from amateur to LCS in less than a year, so experienced veterans like Impact and Vulcan had to help him develop. At the time, EG found success with this strategy. The underlying problems with the org's internal structure wouldn't reveal themselves until summer. Danny was stable in the spring. The team functioned well around the team fighting beast, and while sources indicate that he was fairly solitary, he got along well with his team. During spring, on-site staff focused heavily on making Danny's environment, food, and schedule as consistently as possible to maintain his comfort. With proper communication, on-site assistance, and a consistent environment, every source from the LCS team concurred that Danny was flourishing. The problem started at MSI. While public pressure and community vitriol factored into the pressure on Danny, my sources thought the shift to Korea played a larger part in his discomfort. On top of the massive shock to his environment, EG chose not to send anyone from its performance staff to MSI with the players, including the single performance staff member who was normally on site with the players all week. Important to note here, he does mention later on the performance staff literally consists of three people, and one of them is presumably GamerDoc. I believe if I go to, let's see, if I go to her account, let's see here. I need to go to, oh shoot. Well, it's gonna be a little bit more difficult because I'm blocked by her. I'd have to go onto my other account. But regardless, I'm pretty sure she's the executive she was the executive of the performance team. Um, you know, uh, so she played a massive role in this. Um, let's continue. Danny's discomfort makes sense. For someone who needs stability and consistency, and had been promised that his needs would be met, the already brutal MSI schedule was grueling. It's no wonder he infamously tweeted that he was glad MSI was over when they were eliminated. I believe this shows a link to the tweet. Yeah, he said, "I'm just glad that it's over. Good luck T1 and G2 tomorrow." And then somebody asked him, "What do you mean glad it's over? Lamau, what the fuck?" And he said, "Because playing 5 straight months of competitive League of Legends with scrims, Riot features, official matches, lock-in, regular LCS season, playoffs, Houston Finals, MSI, group stage, Rumble stage, semis, and everyone hates you. Man, I would really like to take a small break." So that was the tweet that he had made that is being referenced. After the events of MSI, Danny's health would continue to deteriorate until his retirement. So, this corroborates what Richard was saying when they were saying that clearly, right, clearly, EG was aware of the predicament. They were aware that he was autistic. They were aware of his needs. They assured his family that he would have those things, right? Um, and that clearly, as MSI was going on, they didn't want to listen to those signs. Enough to the point where they didn't even send a single member of the performance staff to be with Danny, which makes no sense. It makes absolutely no sense. And as we get to the later part of the article, you're going to see who they did choose to want to send. And it's mind boggling that they chose to send that person over someone from the performance staff. And it definitely shows their mentality as an organization. Summer split. This is when things start to go really wrong. And for me as a viewer, you could tell just from watching the games that something was clearly wrong with Danny. Just looking at how he was reacting while he was playing, in terms of like his reactions after matches, he just looked very off. Like, don't get me wrong, he was a very solitary person, and he had his own little, quirks in how he acted. He was a very reserved person. You could just tell just by looking at him. Um, but this was weird even for him, and it was quite apparent. Summer split. Over the course of the summer regular season, concern grew among members of the coaching and performance staff. Danny had grown more solitary, began showing up late to scrims, and saw significant regression in his scrim performance. As staff grew more concerned, Danny was given permission to skip scrim blocks along with any other measure of comfort he requested. Um, there's an edit here that says Cowrie, who was the substitute who played with EG when they went to Chicago and played with EG at Worlds. Um, Cowrie did not play a scrim during summer. Originally, it was reported that he did play scrims with the team during the summer split, but he did not. So that was not true. Um, after week 3, Riot's annual summer break gave the LCS a week off. A source explained that while most of the team was willing to scrim throughout the break, EG used it as a vacation to allow Danny to fly home and visit family. Even early in the split, it was clear to staff that Danny was not okay, and they did everything they could to help. During this time, upper management and executives remained largely unconcerned and uninvolved. So let's repeat that one more time, guys. One more time. Even early in the split, it was clear to staff that Danny was not okay. During this time, the upper management and executives remained largely unconcerned and uninvolved. Again, these same executives are the primary point of contact to the family. Can you see where this is a problem? A serious problem. A lot also changed internally for summer, with a source on the LCS team describing it as if the rest of the company stopped caring after we won spring. Goes to show you how little they actually know about the LCS and how gaming works and esports in general. That was me saying that, by the way. A member of upper management who had generally been present on site in spring went fully remote during the summer. For example, as the team saw its young superstar struggle, certain members of staff stopped pulling their weight. And there's another edit here. This article previously corroborated a claim in Lewis's article about a staff member frequently missing work. Those claims were improper reporting by me, as I didn't have the full picture. Since I heard about it from multiple places, I assumed it to be accurate without properly looking into it. So he doesn't necessarily say that it didn't entirely happen. it's a little bit vague as to whether or not what exactly went on there. Again, he's saying he heard it from multiple places and he assumed it to be accurate without properly looking into it. I would imagine Richard Lewis would have done that effort and would have done that work, um, because he always does. So I would still say it probably happened. Um, Now, again, whether or not who it was or how often, who knows. But the fact that this is even being brought up as a topic in general, or that sources were even saying it, implies, look, clearly something was fucking wrong, okay? Somebody was doing something they shouldn't have been doing. Per my sources, the performance team felt 60-40 on whether or not to advise benching Danny during the regular season. However, executives and upper management were passionate about letting him play for preservation of their brand interests, and the player insisted that he was fine. So Danny's spot on the active roster remained unquestioned. You can start to see the red flags. By the end of the regular season, the team mostly thought Danny would be able to play for the rest of the year. He was by no means the paragon of stability, but he was always a unique player, so there wasn't panic yet. According to the information I've gathered, it's clear that EG desperately needed a mental health professional on site, especially because that person might have been able to predict the crisis on the horizon. Yes, he's definitely correct here, but I do want to point out it specifically mentions the team mostly thought Danny would be able to play for the rest of the year, not, you know, uh, the executives or any of this other stuff, right? Like the team. When I hear the team, I'm thinking the other players, maybe a few coaches. That's what I think of when I hear the team. I don't really think of like the upper management, you know. I think there were clearly things that were being communicated, but maybe the players just weren't aware. And you'll see later in the article, right? The players were deliberately not told certain pieces of information in order to preserve their mental focus and fortitude. So, look, while the team may not have been aware of it, I think there was clearly, obviously, things still happening in behind the scenes. Again, speculation, but just giving my perspective. Timeline, the breakdown. This is where my sources contradict Lewis's article, and most significantly, because he was adamant that people at EG knew about Danny's desire to quit the team prior to playoffs, and I couldn't find any direct evidence of that. It's possible that some of the people who worked closest with Danny alerted upper management with concerns about his health, but I couldn't confirm it. To the knowledge of my sources, Danny had never said that he wanted to quit prior to playoffs. If he had, it went straight to the org's leadership and was buried before it got to the players, coaches, or performance staff. And this is what I was talking about. This is when I say, look, I don't believe that the fact that the team thought everything was fine or that things were still okay enough, I don't buy that Danny didn't say anything. I don't buy that people weren't batting for Danny and that there's somehow this never got communicated to the executives. Um, he even mentions here if he had, it went straight to the org's leadership and was buried before it got to the players, coaches, or performance staff. Like, I genuinely do believe there were probably conversations between Danny and the executives, and maybe even the executives even might have even said like, "Look, okay, we're hearing you out, we get it," and then just lying to his family, lying to the team, lying to the performance staff, lying to the coaches. Look, it's very likely that that was probably the case. Um, Again, nothing to write home about. I don't have any sources or anything. Um, but just kind of the way that the more information you find about this organization and how they're run, the more you start to notice the patterns, and you can start to kind of speculate with a little bit more clarity as to, hey, this probably happened, or this isn't like a clear cut. They don't have plausible deniability in this, right? Um, so yeah, Danny had never said that he wanted to quit prior to playoffs, and if he had, it went straight to the leadership staff. Like, I just don't buy it, or I do buy that. I do buy that I understand. Maybe the team didn't know, but I think Danny knew, and I think Danny probably tried to say something to the executives, and they just didn't listen. After EG lost to C9 in the first round of playoffs, the coaching and performance staff heard for the first time that Danny wanted to quit, and several sources confirmed that head coach Rigby began a push to bench him immediately. In his view, there was no point trying to push a player on stage when they didn't want to play. He proposed substituting Tomio into the jungle position, with Inspired moving to mid and Jojo Pyun moving to ADC. Um, the internal debate around benching Danny drew proverbial battle lines within the staff, and this is the first time I'm comfortable naming many of the specific people involved on either side. So this is where we're gonna get into. You're gonna coincidentally notice some very familiar names. Doing things that, number one, they're not educated enough to know about, right? They shouldn't be making these decisions. They don't know how the esport works, um, or how multiple esports work, especially League of Legends, right? And all that. So number one, they don't have the expertise to be making these decisions. Number two, um, it's the same names that cause problems. It's the same names that cause problems, and they're all upper management, executives, leadership, right? CEO Nicole LaPointe Jameson, direct, and then also the director. In addition to her, director of performance Lindsay Gamerdoc Miglior and Andy Barton, were pushing for Danny to continue playing. On the other side, Rigby was supported by the performance staff, Artemis Doyle, who's no longer with EG, and Dr. Respawn Psy, in the push to allow who's now with Cloud9. In the push to allow a substitute player, my sources corroborate Lewis's claim that the push to bench Danny was shut down over executive concern about market value and the centrality of Danny to their brand. This is a stupid defense by the management as well, which I will talk about later. Sources further confirmed that Danny made a deal with upper management to play with the team until Chicago, apparently choosing to play out of an obligation to help qualify his team for Worlds, since Danny didn't originally want to play, and sources say he accepted the deal out of a perceived duty to the team. The allegations of coercion are reasonable, especially considering EG's future actions. Again, why I don't believe that Danny didn't talk to the fucking executives beforehand. He probably did, and nobody fucking heard a word from it because the executives are scumbags. All of them. The TSM series did not go how anyone expected. Staff were already aware that Danny needed a consistent environment and schedule, and would usually reach out for help or for a break if he was under prolonged stress. It was important for him to avoid extended periods of high pressure. However, EG's best of 5 against TSM lasted 8 hours. I remember this vividly. 8 hours due to extensive audio issues, which was, by all accounts, the straw that broke the camel's back. Every single source stated in no uncertain terms, so in certain terms, that after the TSM series, Danny was in no condition to continue playing. Remember that. So, actually, to go back briefly, right? So, to go back very briefly, um, notice that the people who were mentioned fighting against Danny playing are all people that have just coincidentally left EG at the end of the season. Artemis left. Dr. Respawn also left. Rigby left. We're going to get to Peter Dunn in a second. Peter Dunn left. Is it? I mean, come on. How many coincidences do you need, bro? The decision. If the TSM series had been a quick 3-0, he might have been fine, one source told me, clarifying that the mental pressure of those 8 hours was too much for a young autistic player who had been struggling for months. During the series, sources say that the other 4 players on the team approached the coaching staff with concerns about Danny's health. Impact was the only player who knew about Danny's situation ahead of the series. But Danny's reaction to the TSM series was concerning enough that everyone else noticed. Management were staunchly against telling the players for fear of further complication, but a coach decided that they had a right to know, especially in light of their concern for Danny's well-being. Inspired and Vulcan were updated on Danny's status after the series. According to a source, the coach chose not to tell Jojo Pyun to avoid putting the weight of Danny's struggle on a player who was even younger than the star ADC. Ahead of its series against Team Liquid, EG was mired in internal chaos. It was abundantly clear at this point to all involved that Danny absolutely could not play another series without compromising his health, even if he could be convinced to do so. Again, compromising his health. Per my sources, there was no one in the LCS or performance teams arguing to let Danny play on. Peter Dunn, the last major holdout, reportedly changed his position once he saw his condition after the TSM series. Edit. Adding additional context because questions about this kept popping up. Subject is Tomio Sakari because of the clash of personality. Oh yeah, this is where he just talks about how why Kaori isn't with EG anymore, and it's basically just because he was toxic, reportedly. He was supposedly toxic. Um, yeah. Sources confirm that while he was staunchly arguing that this is Peter Dunn, by the way. Sources confirm that while he was staunchly arguing that Danny was in no state to continue, Dunn was approached by a member of org leadership and asked to convince him to play against Team Liquid. Despite this person understanding that the previous series was highly traumatic for the young player, they intended to exploit Dunn's friendship with him. This request was flat out refused, as Dunn was unwilling to cross that line. Two sources recalled that this incident sparked Dunn's decision to leave Evil Geniuses and North America for the 2023 competitive year. There is no statement in this article, in my opinion, that speaks to how fucking despicable and rude and just appalling this organization is than that paragraph. Just hearing, hey, Peter Dunn, we know that, Danny's in no condition to play right now. Could compromise his health, physical and mental. But because you're friends with him, we need you to try to convince him to stay, to play, because of our brand value. Do you guys understand how scummy that is? Do you guys understand just how sad that is? How fucking appalling that is to read? If you're his family and you're reading this, what are the thoughts going through your mind? He's still with Evil Geniuses. He's under the Creative Collective, guys. Put yourself in their shoes. What would you be thinking after reading that? What would you be thinking? It's fucking despicable. It's horrible. It's inhumane. It's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. Nobody deserves this. Nobody. The executives at EG received direct reports detailing the extent of Danny's struggle and insisted that he play regardless. Every single coach, player, and member of support staff, to the knowledge of my sources, was extremely concerned for Danny's health and insisted that he receive the break he'd clearly needed for months. Despite all of that, Danny played against Team Liquid that Sunday. Up until this point, there was plausible deniability in the choices of upper management and executives. Previously, the on-site team was not aligned on the best course of action for Danny, and the young prodigy had directly, but intermittently, assured his coaches that he was all right to play. Without a mental health expert on site, it's understandable that they took his word at face value. This I do question, because if you knew Danny was having, well, first off, if you know Danny's autistic coming into the spring split, even before then, really, the beginning of the summer split of 2021, um, if you knew that was the case with him, if you could see his mental health deteriorating since MSI, guys, I just don't believe that after all of the shit he's gone through and how messed up he is mentally at this point, and somewhat physically, I would imagine, right? It doesn't just happen overnight. I can't understand how anybody on this fucking, like, any of these coaches could have thought, yeah, let's take Danny's word for it. Guys, it's already known that Danny clearly cared about how he played. Um, Richard Lewis, and Thorin and Monte Cristo and Rich's Wrath talked about this on the Four Horsemen podcast. How clearly Danny was a player who who truly did care about how he played, even in losses, to the point where If he lost, if he, or I'm sorry, even in wins, if they won a game and he played poorly, he was devastated by it. It shook him to the core. Um, the disappointment he felt within himself, right? This is a guy who cares, who has so much empathy for others, and truly wishes the best for other people, and truly puts other people above himself to a point where it's almost he's self-demeaning, right? He's almost, he goes too far with it to the point where he's willing to hurt himself for the benefit of others, even people who have treated him poorly. Um, so to me, it's ludicrous that you could take his word for, hey, yeah, I'm okay to play, because I think any person who is that kind of way, right? Like me myself, I am the kind of person where I put other people in front of myself to probably an unhealthy degree, where I will take the flack for something if maybe I didn't really do it. It's a problem. It's definitely a problem. You can't take somebody's word who you know is like that, right? In terms of when it comes to like, hey, are you ready to play? Like, can you play? Are you feeling okay enough to play? Like, at some point, you have to look at him and go, no, like I for the sake of your safety, we can't allow you to play. You know, um, so I do find that a little bit confusing. There was no such leeway in the executive decision to let Danny play against Team Liquid. This decision reeks of an appalling lack of empathy, a lacking mental health infrastructure, is no excuse to ignore the serious concerns of the entire LCS staff. After the series, Danny flew home with his family and finalized his retirement. This is when things get broken down to his family. The aftermath. Danny's aftermath. Once he arrived at home, Danny's family took him for a medical checkup. Out of respect for his privacy, I'll only say that he was massively underweight and had several other related medical issues. This corroborates what Thorin was saying on his video. Per a source close to Danny, the MD was concerned enough to recommend hospitalization. However, Danny chose to recover at home since his symptoms originated from spending time in an uncomfortable environment. Danny's health was a complete shock to his family. Let me repeat that. Danny's health was a complete shock to his family, with upper management serving as their primary point of contact in the org. His family was under the impression that Danny was completely fine all year. Until this point, they had no idea that he'd shown signs of burnout and stress for months. This is Do you understand why I'm speculating now that Danny was definitely probably talking to upper management and upper management just wasn't saying anything to the family? Again, fuck this idea that this organization has values, that they're a family, that they care about you or their players. They don't. They're the fucking opposite of family. And if they are a family, it's a fucking abhorrent one. It's a family where you put others down to keep yourself up. It's a family of bullies. That's what EG is. It's a family of high school bullies. Until this point, they had no idea that he had shown signs of burnout and stress from. I mean, that's just got to be the most the sad and depressing thing I've ever heard. If you're a family, like, if you're one of Danny's family members, I mean, that's just, it's fucked up and it's wrong, man. It's fucked up and it's wrong. They took advantage of him. They did. The 19-year-old former pro player recovered with his family at home over the course of several months. He disappeared entirely from public view and stayed out of the general discourse until the controversy with the LCS Players Association (LCSPA) and his family. Per sources close to the situation, the events detailed in the leaked message from Danny's sister were only partially true. Lewis covers the specific events in more detail, but in essence, EG was accused of intimidation in an attempt to prevent Danny's family from reaching out to the Players Association. Allegedly, a coach at EG reached out to Danny's family and informed them about the LCSPA with a recommendation to contact them as a last resort, and was fired by EG for doing so. In his video, Thorin claimed that this coach was not actually fired because of this contact, unlike what it was alleged in the leaked message. If the coach had ever been fired, for notifying a player's family about the LCSPA, Riot's investigation would have found seriously damning results and it would have been made public. However, a source did confirm that the coach was afraid he would be fired for giving Danny's family that information. It's possible that this was misconstrued somewhere along the line. While EG wasn't technically guilty of the controversy that sparked an investigation, the coach's fear of retaliation for trying to protect a player is telling of EG's internal culture. He is absolutely spot on with that point. Absolutely true. It's one of those things where it's like, hey, people who think things that are, well, it's legal. Yeah, well, it might be fucking legal, but it's not fucking right, is it? Danny's latest brush with public scrutiny was this week, last week, for us. With the recent exposés about EG, he published a statement addressing the allegations on Twitter and announcing his new position as a streamer for the EG Creator Collective. Um, Despite the convenient timing, because this tweet came out and was posted literally the same day that Thorin made his video, but it was hours after Thorin posted his YouTube video, basically talking about the Danny situation. Despite the convenient timing, multiple sources confirmed that he had been confirmed as a streamer for at least a month prior to the announcement. The announcement about Danny's future had been scheduled for the last week of February, well before Thorne's video was released. So it begs the fucking question. Why didn't they fucking release it then? And why did they release it right after Thorne made his video? Oh, maybe because EG's fucking incompetent and they didn't expect Thorne to make a video about it for some reason. And they realized when Thorin made the video, quick, we need to announce that Danny's a streamer because otherwise we're gonna look like shit, fucking people. And honestly, it didn't even fucking help. Because of this, right? So here's the statement, right? Here's the statement. And look, people have been saying, look, there's no way he wrote this. There's no way. Somebody from the fucking PR department wrote this. This just isn't right, right? This isn't how Danny normally talks. Um, And uh, and I tend to agree with that sentiment because you just read the tweet and you can just fucking tell it's just corporate bullshit. It sounds like a fucking email that you write while you're at work. Um, but it was definitely like, who the fuck knows if that's actually true to some degree. This is Danny's tweet. Hello all, and let me know if you think this is, if this sounds like someone who, was in the situation we just described and is the kind of person that I just described. Let me know if you think this is actually fucking him. Hello all. I I know there has been quite a lot of news out there, and I want to tell you that it is completely on me, and the accusations towards EG aren't true. The truth is that the pressure of being an esports pro has overwhelmed me to my breaking point, and EG supported me all the way. I love the League of Legends community deeply, and my wish is that I can offer my fans a unique look into esports with a relaxed view of the space. With that in mind, I'm happy to announce myself as an official member of EG's Creator Collective. I will be creating content full time on Twitch. I sincerely hope you'll be staying along for the ride. Thanks to EG for giving me the platform and space to continue enjoying my love of all things gaming, and to all of you that have been so patient. Thank you. Heart, heart, heart. More details soon. XXX. Now, I don't know if you noticed the dead fucking giveaway that just fucking proves that he didn't write this. But if you missed it, I'll say it again for you. And again, tell me if you think this is a fucking like kid, an autistic person who has been dealing with a lot of pressure and problems and health problems. Let me know if you really believe that he wrote this. My wish is that I can offer my fans a unique look into esports with a relaxed view of the space. With that in mind, I'm happy to announce myself as an official member of EG's Creator Collective. I will be creating content full time on Twitch. Does that not sound like the fattest fucking PR statement you've ever heard in your entire life? What fucking player? You guys have surely seen how players tweet. When have you ever heard the vocabulary of a unique look into esports with a relaxed view of the space? And things like, thanks to EG for giving me the platform and space to continue enjoying my love of all things gaming. When have you fucking ever heard a player use that language? Authentically. The answer is never. So there were already some pretty good signs he didn't write this shit. Also, mind you, at this point, there had already been rumors. Well, not rumors, but Thorne had made in his video, he had said multiple times that it was basically, he was saying, like, look, um, potentially, he was like, kind of hinting at the fact that he had sources that were saying that, by the way, half the people at fucking EG don't even make their tweets. Or like sometimes players are forced to make tweets in certain ways, based on executives saying, "Hey, you should tweet this way," um, and kind of forcing them to say certain things on Twitter, implying that they have a good relationship with the org when in reality it's the opposite, right? And this is what Arsh says in his article. However, a source close to the situation did confirm that Danny did not write the statement attached to the announcement. He tweeted it because EG had him do so. This just corroborates the evidence and the things that were said from Richard Lewis and Thorne about how Nicole and all these other fucking executives just force people to say certain things in public to make it look like everyone's happy family, everyone's happy go lucky, everything's fantastic, when in reality, it's just coercion and bullshit. Now, this is where we get into some of the stuff where it gets into the performance staff that's involved, and we get into then we'll get into some of the workplace stuff that just goes to show you just how shitty of a fucking company EG really is. So in the aftermath, the EG LCS aftermath, um, so here's some of the things that were said by some of the staff members before the TL series, the Team Liquid series. A source recalls a member of upper management saying that it's fucking annoying that Danny is ruining everything, despite that person previously pushing him to keep playing. Another staff member allegedly remarked, "Danny is fucking retarded. What the fuck was I supposed to do?" Look, I listened to LS react to this, and yes, I agree with him that this is probably normal language that gets used in the workplace. Doesn't make it fucking right, though. Like, thought the whole point of EG was that they were gonna like subvert expectations, and instead they just do the same bad things that every other fucking org does. And then their differentiator is not even that they, oh, but we take that and then we make it, but we do things a little bit, but we do things better than they. No, it's like they just do it worse. That's their differentiator. That's how they subvert your expectations. They're so much worse than you could have possibly imagined. That's how they subvert your expectations. Unfucking believable. Unfucking believable. Several sources familiar with EG's performance staff were also clear that the executive leading the department was almost entirely uninvolved with the decision making about Danny. I'm trying to find my phone. Sorry, let me grab this. Because I am pretty sure, I'm pretty positive that that director is GamerDoc. Pretty positive. Let's see here. GamerDoc, Senior Director of Gaming and Performance. So when he says, over the course of the split, this executive is alleged to have rarely attended the. Oh, I'm sorry. Several sources from other Egypt performance staff were also clear that the executive leading the department was almost entirely uninvolved with the decision making about Danny. I mean, guys, you can't get more damning than this. It's clearly GamerDoc. Like, it just is. It just fucking is, isn't it? Additionally, multiple sources confirmed that this director didn't provide any on-site or direct consultation for the issue. Despite this being one of the most tenuous situations the performance team could have possibly faced, EG's already understaffed performance team was even more strained than initially appeared. Within the LCS vertical, the relationship with the executives at EG wasn't necessarily antagonistic as some claim, rather many of the staff felt that the connection didn't exist at all. Their communication only went one way. There were several examples of upper management not properly reporting concerns and updates from the LCS team to executives, which was a pattern reflected in EG CSGO controversies. Again, it's not just fucking League of Legends, they're doing it with everything. And if you think Valorant is excluded from this, you're on something else, man. Like Valorant is definitely getting hit with this too. Definitely. Um, Workplace pervasive dysfunction. Oof, man. We called ourselves, this is the social media team, the marketing department, which, by the way, guys, how often have you heard me get mad at the marketing department for terrible jerseys or just no content at all or just lackluster shit? Like, we don't even have the basics that Cloud9 and Team Liquid have. Like, we just have fuck all when it comes to marketing. No content, no cool merch, no nice. I mean, the jerseys this year are good, but I mean, the merch is so bad, the content, the video content is so bad. They have clearly plenty of money for it. They just refuse to spend it, right? Um, but this is what they had. This is what one of the sources from the social media or the marketing team had to say. We called ourselves posting monkeys because we really didn't have any creative freedom, and we were then blamed for the higher ups' terrible ideas performing poorly, said a source formerly on the socials team. Another source confirmed that the original ideas were nearly impossible to get approved because the executive team had no understanding of gaming culture or the community. Consistently, creatives at EG found themselves cornered into adopting the brand voice of people who have no knowledge of the community. Fans of EG can likely speak to the out of touch vibe that permeates a lot of their content and socials presence. This is fucking ridiculous. Sometimes, even when staff were able to be creative, that work was taken by executives. A source recalled that, on occasion, tweets would be taken from the socials team and repurposed for the CEO's personal account. Nicole is a fucking fraud. And it's not just her tweets, it's her whole personality. It's everything about her. She's a fucking liar. She's a fucking liar. I have no sympathy for her. I have no respect for her. I hope she gets fucking fired. She probably won't, but she should. Because she's a shit human being and she's a shit fucking CEO. I have no sympathy. None. She is shit. She's a horrible human being. You can't defend it anymore. You cannot defend it anymore. It's over. I don't give a shit if she blocks me. I don't give a shit if she blocks any of you. I don't give a fuck. She's a horrible human being. I have nothing left but fucking disdain for her at this point. Terrible. Horrible. One of the worst people you can possibly have. A CEO who doesn't even give a shit. Who will lie to a player's family. Who will lie to the players and the coaches and tell the coaches to deceive the player. To force them to play. Who will take the ideas of their employees who are working hard and come up with creative and innovative ideas, will take their ideas and use it for themselves. And then when she comes up with a shit idea, she blames the people below her. Who's ignorant of the fact that she's hiring her friends, moving her friends up the ladder, and punishing anyone who isn't her friend. While their friends get to live in the luxury of being an executive while doing fuck all but damaging their team, their reputation, hurting their players' mental and physical health. This is the kind of person Nicole is. She's a fraud. One source used the LCS Summer Finals as an example of the disconnect between the regular staff and executives to highlight the ways that the higher-ups alienated many at the company. For the Riot after party, every team's on-site staff was invited. However, EG communicated that only executives and hand-picked members of staff were allowed to attend. Despite every other org encouraging their entire staff to attend, EG chose to exclude its general employees. For this source, this matched the detached, aristocratic leadership style that EG's executives exemplified. During MSI, a source alleges EG used one of their staff slots at MSI for its CIO. So this is, remember when I was talking about earlier when I said they chose not to put in one of their performance staff members and they put somebody in that position that frankly just makes no sense to put them in? By the way, guys, CIO, if I look up CIO, I'm pretty sure it doesn't even typically mean business definition. Yeah. So this is a classic example of people who know nothing about fucking business, let alone esports, using an acronym that typically means one thing that people know of and just changing it for the sake of changing it in a way that makes no fucking sense, and is quite frankly just stupid as fuck. It's like some little kid who like wants to pretend that they're the big boss coming up with some stupid fucking decision because they think it's like them being clever, but in reality it's just fucking bullshit and dumb. So one of their staff slots at MSI was used for its Chief Innovation Officer, CIO. Now, if you guys know anything about business, you know that CIO typically stands for Chief Information Officer. Chief Information Officer. And instead, what EG's done here is we've done the big switcheroo. Instead of CIO meaning Chief Innovation or Chief Information Officer, we've done Chief Innovation Officer. Aha, look at us. We're really subverting expectations. Look at how smart we are. How fucking stupid do you have to be to come up with this dumb shit? I mean, it is just so stupid. Who the fuck even is their CIO, their Chief Innovation Officer? It's fucking dumb, dude. It's fucking stupid. I don't even know who it is. Really, I really don't. Someone who knows, please let me know. Instead of sending a single member of the socials or performance teams, I couldn't confirm why he was sent, so it's a he. But I cannot imagine why the CIO, not the information officer, guys, the innovation officer, would be more important on site at MSI than socials or performance staff, especially because I recall the anger of NA fans during MSI who were disappointed by the lack of behind the scenes content from our sole international representative. Not to fucking mention the fact, why wasn't there anyone from the performance team there when clearly that would have been, made a lot more sense. Oh, but there is an edit here, so let's see if any of that information was slightly off. The following is new information made available to me after publishing. Executives decided to send their CIO to Korea for him to work on a partnership deal. So it was all for fucking business. Because that's what this company fucking cares about. They didn't care about sending their young autistic player who they knew was going to have issues in a completely different environment in a very high stress situation. Instead of them going, we have one of two options. We can send our CIO to go close a business deal, or we can send a member of the performance team who's been with Danny for fucking literally every single week that he's been in the LCS, and we could send that guy there to help Danny get acclimated to the new environment and try to, keep him calm and keep his mental and physical health in good condition. We can either send that guy or we can send our CIO to close a business deal. And who did they choose? They choose the fucking CIO because they're scumbags who only care about business and making money, as we can see from the Chevron deal, which I'll talk about later. And that's all they really fucking care about. They don't care about their players. They're not fucking family. They don't even respect the families of the players, which is clearly shown here. They don't respect the players, the coaches, anybody. They only care about their fucking profit margin because that's all they fucking care about. Because they're a shitty company run by a shitty CEO and shitty executives who will just kiss the CEO's ass, and she just lets them do whatever the fuck they want because she's friends with them. Fuck you. Send their CIO to Korea for him to work on a partnership deal and other operations which needed a senior staff member, under the belief that they would lose interest if they waited until after the tournament. Since there wasn't a content person on site, he was also tasked with taking short videos and photos as EG's MSI content. Fucking dogshit idea. Um, the CIO almost immediately caught COVID upon arriving in Korea, meaning that his main reason for being there wasn't even fulfilled. These reasons were not communicated to the socials or performance staff, who were not able to send a representative to MSI because of it. They can't even manage a fucking business deal because they're that fucking incompetent. How fucking dumb do you have to be, dude? How dumb do you have to be? Another source recalled the reaction to a company party in late 2022, which took place a few days after EG unexpectedly laid off 14 members of staff after losing a decade-long sponsor in Monster Energy. Again, proving they only care about fucking sponsors and business. They don't give a shit about their employees. Again, if this is at an end of the year party, it means it's around fucking Christmas and they're laying 14 people off for no real reason other than we lost a sponsor, even though they have plenty of fucking money and support off of Peak 6, where they don't fucking need Monster Energy. It's not like that big of a deal where it's like, oh, we don't have Monster Energy, we gotta fire people. It's like, no, they could have kept these people. They chose to get rid of them because they were pissed off and they're fucking assholes. And they're willing to fire people during fucking Christmas and then have a party afterwards because they're scumbags. The source said it was jarring to see that executives in Seattle were laughing and smiling at the end of year celebration, and it left them feeling that EG was faking and sincere, as if there was no empathy from any of the executives. So that's pretty much it, guys. That's pretty much it from the article, right? So, oh my God, what are my takeaways? Well, I mean, I've kind of already mentioned them. EG is a shit company, probably one of the worst companies, if not the worst company in esports I've ever fucking heard of. While not all of the things that are in this article are exclusive to EG, some of these problems are very, very, well referenced to by other highly respected people in their respective scenes with other organizations and how they run their teams. But I don't think I've seen it to this extent. Even Thorin and Richard Lewis and Arsh Goyal all mentioned that there is no shortage of stories from EG doing this ridiculous behavior. Um, it's almost hard to find it's much more harder to find people who have any even good experiences with EG. Most of them, or actually pretty much all of them, are bad, and maybe there's a couple neutral ones. But yeah, I mean, pretty much all of them are shit. Um, and they're all all the ex EG employees are very willing to talk about how shit EG is. So this is why let's let's change the topic, right? Let's change the topic. How this affects all esports divisions. This is the worst fucking titling I've ever done in any of my videos. Absolutely atrocious titling. Can't even get it to center properly. It's kind of sad. So it doesn't even look good because of the background. I don't give a shit. Um, how this affects all the esports titles. Obviously, it affects League of Legends. I haven't really been caring a whole lot about how EG's been performing in League of Legends this split, mostly because I do think, while yes, they have been underperforming, and I think the Super Week has massively helped them in terms of their standings. I do think that it can be pretty difficult to expect a team to perform at their best when all of this information is coming out. And so I don't really have as much criticism toward the LCS team, although I think it's quite obvious, right? When you look at it from the LCS perspective, very understandable to see. I mean, look, all these people, man, who I was saying at the end of the year, like, man, I'm kind of shocked DG's deciding to let go of all of these people, like Peter Dunn and Rigby and Artemis and all these people. Like, why are you getting rid of these people? Like, these people clearly are very good at their jobs, and it just didn't really make sense to get rid of them. Now that this information has come out, it makes so much more sense as to why they left, right? It just makes so much more sense. It makes it, it's the puzzle piece that was missing, right? Um, and I think and it obviously affects the players. It obviously affects even the new employees that are coming into the org, right? Now it's very concerning if you're an employee and you're like, well, crap, what did I just get myself into? They promised me all these things, and now I'm just not sure, because that's a hallmark of EG, has been promising coaches, promising high level people to yes, we're going to give you the power. Yes, you can do what you want. Yes, these are all the great resources we have available for you. Um, and people sign up for it and then realize it's the complete opposite, right? And that they're not treated with respect. And I think, to clarify, guys, the reason why so many high level coaches and management and talent are willing to join Evil Geniuses is because, as Richard Lewis and Thorin mention in the Four Horsemen podcast, guys, Evil Geniuses, in terms of the history of esports, of North American esports, they are the most storied organization, the most successful, biggest organization in the history of North American esports, guys. Really let that sink in, and then think back to what you've seen from the Counter-Strike team this last 2 years, and them getting rid of the Dota 2 team without any real appreciation for what they've done for EG. Like, I think it's fair to say that this is just like, it's just reached unreasonable levels. Um, that it's wrong, right? And look, I understand that if you're a new CEO of a company like EG, you want to and you want to make things your own way, right? You don't want to just necessarily completely do the same things that were originally being done, but in the old ownership. But there's a difference between changing some things up in a smart and intelligent way where you're doing them strategically, you're doing them with a plan in mind and a goal in mind, and you're willing to execute said plan. And there's another thing on just subverting expectations for the sake of subverting expectations, guys. This isn't the fucking Last of Us 2, Part 2. Like, we don't need to be subverting expectations for the sake of subverting expectations with no real end goal or plan in mind to execute, just because you want to be able to say that it's yours. Um, it's pretty distasteful. It's fucked up. It's wrong. Um, and so, as it, in terms of how it affects the LCS team, I think there's plenty of ways. The players are obviously going to be affected. The coaches are going to be affected. New employees are going to be affected. Um, in terms of, and that, it makes you question how much power EG has in regards to, do they have a lot of power within the LCS because they're so intimidating? Um, you know, it boggles my mind to me that they're going to make the decision of, yes, let's have a player who's autistic, who has clearly been dealing with mental and physical health problems. The way that we're going to introduce him back into EG is, or you know, announce what he's going to be doing next with EG. Now that he's not a main player on the LCS roster, is we're going to put him in a position where he's going to be streaming in front of thousands of people. Um, reminding you, this is a guy who can't deal with pressure very well when it's this magnitude of pressure. Because you guys gotta understand, streaming is not like a 1 hour thing. Streaming is a 5+ hour thing. So let's put the guy who struggles to deal with high pressure in extended periods of time, struggles to deal with people hating on him, struggles to deal with you know um, just a lot of social anxiety and whatnot, and has been dealing with a lot of things. Just things have been articles have been coming out. Let's take that guy and put him in a position where he's going to be streaming for the Creator Collective, where he's going to be basically being a full-time streamer, streaming League of Legends for multiple hours at a time, while people in the fucking chat who are 13-year-olds and don't know any better ask him questions like, "Why did you leave the main roster?" and why are you so bad, or why are you not playing for EG, or like all the stupid shit that they're gonna say because they're gonna say it because they don't have a fucking filter and they're 13-year-olds who don't have a brain and can't understand that. Yeah, maybe you shouldn't talk about that while he's streaming, and maybe you should just be a little bit more human and just leave him the fuck alone and just be like, just talk about anything else. Talk about any type of interest you might have in common, but like, don't be mentioning that, right? But people won't. They're gonna mention that shit. They're gonna bring it up to him, and like, it's fucked up that he's gonna have to deal with that. That's not gonna help his mental state, right? So they still haven't learned, right? People are saying that they don't think he's going to stream. I think he might get forced to, right? If he's been forced to play, who's to say he won't be forced to stream occasionally, right? Like maybe it's a once a month thing, but he's probably going to get forced to stream by the org at some point, right? Because they want that brand value, which, by the way, is a stupid fucking point. Like, the brand value thing makes no sense. Rich's Wrath said it best on the Four Horsemen podcast. It would make sense to not play Danny in the playoffs because of the summer split, if you need to, right? And it would also make more sense to obviously put Cowrie as a fucking substitute instead of like a jungler and a coach. Um, but like it doesn't make any sense. Like if you want to preserve his value, you'd bench him so that the last thing that people remember about him was how he won the spring playoffs for EG, and how he's a great team fighter and he's a young player and all this. Like that would have made more sense instead of for protecting his brand value rather than forcing him to play where he's going to play bad. He's going to be emotionally and physically, people are going to be able to tell he's not 100%. um, it just doesn't make any sense to me that you're actually hurting his brand value by doing that, but you're claiming that the reason you're forcing him to play is to improve his brand value. Like, it just shows a lack of business understanding at that point, right? um, so it's unbelievable, right? And then like, so how this affects the other teams, right? Like the Dota 2 team, they got rid of their one of their most storied teams. Um, in order, players like Arteezy who have been with that org for fucking ages, man, and they've gotten rid of him for what? They got rid of him. They got rid of those guys to sign. Don't get me wrong, a very talented South American team, right? Like a very strong contending team from South America, right? But the problem with it is, and it is a South American, it's a quote unquote South American super team. But the problem is, like, it's clear they did it because of the money, because it's going to be much easier to sign players like this. And by the way, guys, at the Lima Major, I watched a little clip of some of the EG players talking about, like, oh wow, what was it like getting signed to Evil Geniuses? Were you expecting to get the get the offer? And like apparently it was just some random person at EG, one of the executives, not even Nicole, just some random fucking person, just like reached out to one of the players on Discord and like basically, said gave him the offer to join EG, and the guy literally, the Peruvian player literally was like, well, this can't be legit, and just kind of ignored it for a second, and then kind of like walked back to it and found out no, it was actually a completely legitimate request. So it's like, how does that make any sense? Like, dude, has Nicole or anybody from the upper management even met these players in person? Like, I don't know, dude. It just seems really crazy to me. And it's clearly just a decision that was made to save cost while still being competitive, right? Which is why I think it was so fitting that Shopify Rebellion ended up beating. Shopify Rebellion is the group of players who were kicked by EG, for the most part. That's why I think it's so fantastic that Shopify Rebellion knocked EG out of the event, because I don't have anything against the EG players, but it was cool to see like that old EG versus new EG, and to see old EG come out on top, I think was a heartwarming thing for me at least. So that's how it affects the Dota 2 team, right? Is obviously the cost saving angle, right? How it affects the Rocket League team even is just because they probably sold them because they just didn't like paying them the extra money for keeping the squad, and they chose to get rid of them right before the season started, which is a completely inhumane thing to do, because now these guys have no time to look for an org to represent them, and if they ended up qualifying for a major or something, they're not going to be able to go, because they don't have any funding, right? Um, as for how it affects the Counter Strike team, I think it's quite obvious, right? Sending the story about the COVID players is egregious. Um, just all the things we've heard from the Counter Strike team, from NAF's statement, and just everything. It's just so bad with the Counter Strike team. It's probably the worst in the Counter Strike team that is with probably any of the other rosters. And that's why when Vorborg says stuff like, oh, but the upper management has always treated me well, it's like, yeah, I don't fucking believe you. And if they have, it's just like a fucking text message and that's it. You know what I mean? Like, they don't actually give a shit about you. GamerDog doesn't even know how to fucking buy skins on the fucking Steam marketplace. Do you think she even knows what she's talking about when it comes to supporting you? Or claiming there's a talent pipeline, or questioning the integrity of analysts' ability to do their job. Oh, sorry guys, it's pretty late at night. Um, so it's just unbelievably fucked up. It's just unbelievably fucked up, everything that's happened. I'm starting to run out of gas here. I feel like I've repeated these things a lot during the past couple of weeks, but also, but even some of the stuff I've mentioned months and months and months before, right? Um, it's heartbreaking to hear this. It really and truly is. Um, it makes me so sad. I think a lot of people, you know what? I'll make this a brief topic of its own. Why am I a fan? I'm sure many of you are wondering why why Fusion are you a fan of Evil Geniuses after finding out all of this information? Like, why haven't you just completely discarded them at this point? And this is the reason why. The reason why is because I want EG to become what they were. I want EG to be the organization that wins championships, that is one of the legacy, that the OG legacy orgs, that treats players with respect, understands their value, cares about them, right? Cares about their coaches, empowers their coaches to make the right decisions and do the right things. I think people misunderstand. They go, why do all these, high quality coaches and management staff always sign with EG? And it's because EG's a legacy org. It's an organization that, when you just see the name, I mean, for anyone who knows anything about esports, it's just like such a pull, right? Um, and there's so much respect that goes into the EG brand and what it used to be, that it kind of carries over into now, right? Even though it's a completely different organization than what it used to be. Um, clearly it still attracts people who think, well, maybe it can be that way if I'm there, right? Um, because I could do this, I could do X, Y, and Z, right? But clearly the CEO doesn't give a shit and is willing to just destroy anything that is remotely remaining of the previous EG, right? And and that's just shitty on her part. It's just completely shitty. You have to respect the past, and I think it's just negligible to just treat the past like shit as well. Like it's just unreal. Like guys, they treated the Dota 2 team like shit, and even to go to like the Valorant team, like guys, the reason why all these Valorant players on the EG roster you've never fucking heard of before is because they're all fucking young as shit. Like they're all a bunch of people that nobody's ever even heard of before. Like you guys don't remember EG at the beginning of Valorant was dog shit. They were absolutely terrible. They couldn't win anything. They couldn't even make it to one of the top leagues, right? Um, and it was just sad, right? And um, that's why with this 10-man roster they're signing a bunch of young ass players because they don't actually like want to spend the money, and then on top of that they don't do anything to develop those players, which just makes no sense. They're just spending money for no reason. um it's absolutely criminal. um you know uh i I'm sorry guys, I'm losing it a bit, but it's unreal to me that this is what EG's become, and it's so different from what it used to be. And that's why I'm still a fan. Is I'm a fan because I want this organization to turn the corner and to become what it was always meant to be, which is the best fucking North American esports org in the history of esports forever. It has that potential. It's got the monetary backing to do so. The only problem is obviously that backing also backs the CEO who used to be an intern at that at the company, right? Um, and it's just like, again, while I don't think things will change, I do want to implore and as a call to action, tell every one of you, like, you guys should absolutely be, when this stuff comes out, you should be very critical of EG. You should and post about it, make it well known, right? Like, public pressure will make changes. If you don't believe me, look what happened to Carlos. Look what happened to, even in real sports guys. Like, look what happened to the owner of the Phoenix Suns. Like, he had to sell out of his shares, right? Like, things can be done here. It just comes down to if enough pressure gets applied, and it's why I said I want as many people to talk about it and as much, you know, um, criticism as can possibly come from it. I want it all to come out so that the board has no choice but to make changes, right? Um, and so that's why I'm a fan. I'm a fan of what they were in the past, and I want them to return to that because if I think, in my opinion at least, a fan who didn't give a shit would just leave EG, right? Would say, "Fuck it, you guys are annoying and you're shit and you're terrible management and you're appalling and disgusting, and I'm just gonna leave." And while I can totally understand that, I'm not trying to rehabilitate them or anything. I'm just saying, fire all the people who are shit. Fire the CEO. Fire the executives that are kissing her ass. Fire the people who are neglecting their job, right? Like, keep the people you need and really make the right decisions going forward. And you can turn things around. You have the money, you have the backing, you have all the resources you could possibly ask for. Um, it's crazy to me, right? Um, so yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous how this has all happened. It's so saddening, but it's just, hopefully it doesn't happen again, but who knows, right? Like, I mean, this is why I say it affects everything, is because, like, Hexed, like, I don't they didn't say anything about Hexed. They didn't say what happened to Obo, guys? Like, Obo was a concern, seriously. Like, he clearly was not having it was clearly having mental health problems and physical health problems, and potentially EG might have been negligent with that as well, right? Who knows, right? It may be something that only Obo will tell someday if he feels comfortable doing so. But um, it's just shocking and sad and um, extremely disappointing. You know, it makes me sick to my stomach thinking about some of the things that I read. Um, it's unreal. It's unreal. I think we're finally, for the end of this video, we're going to talk about the Chevron sponsorship. because I saw some concerning things regarding this. First off, I'd like to say Match Made in Heaven, shit organization with one of the shit companies, one of the shit ethical, one of the shittiest ethical esports companies in the world in the history of esports, combining with one of the shittiest ethically ethical shitty ethical corporations in the history of corporations, pretty much. Like Chevron, guys, is pretty fucking atrocious. If you don't know who Chevron is for some reason, go look them up, and you can find all the fucking information you need to show you that, yeah, pretty shit company. They don't treat the environment well. They destroy marine biology. They destroy fucking, well, for starters, they're destroying fucking, they're taking advantage of gas prices to keep making the prices go up, because they can control the supply. Just really shitty things, right, are going on with Chevron. They always have been. They fucking like destroyed a whole Amazon or some shit, um, and didn't really get into too much trouble for it. Like, eventually become so rich and powerful, it just doesn't matter anymore. And one of the arguments I was seeing was, well, but they're not as bad as the betting sites. And it's like, motherfucker, they are worse than the betting sites. Like, yeah, the betting sites are sometimes, depending on the betting site, controlled by some type of like gang or something. But like, dude, even sometimes they get shut down. Like, even sometimes those orgs or those corporations get shut down, and it becomes, maybe those people go and generate a new, organization with a completely new name, but it's kind of the same operation. Maybe that's the case. But guys, there's nothing that can touch Chevron. Like, they have too much money. I mean, for fuck's sake, they did a buyback of like $75 million, instead of using that money to, upgrade their equipment and, maybe donate to the environment in some way. Like, instead, they just used it for themselves. Um, Chevron's one of the shittiest companies in the world. It has been for a long time. And yeah, to see people defending it just kind of fucking surprised me. I don't really understand it. It makes no sense. It's one of the shittest sponsor deals you could get from a ethical standpoint. Obviously, in terms of how much money they're going to get from it, it's clearly a great monetary one. But guys, it's not just about monetary things. You guys got to remember, EG has plenty of fucking backing from Peak Six, which is an investment arbitrage company. Which means they invest in like derivatives, right? They're in like derivative trading. So they make plenty of fucking money. They have plenty of fucking funding to give to EG, so there's no real need to make this partnership other than to just spite people and basically stick a middle finger out in front of them, right? Um, it's fucked up. It's wrong. It's just terrible, honestly, and um, yeah, it's really disappointing and sad and depressing and all the all the adjectives you could use to describe how shitty this is, are probably accurate ones to use. Um, yeah, I mean, the Chevron partnership is just shit. The timing couldn't have been worse. The organization is fucking atrocious ethically. They do illegal things all the time. Um, and it's just awful. It's just absolutely awful. And can't really defend it, can you? Because they had a choice and they chose this one, and it makes no sense. It's fucked up and it's wrong, and they did it anyway because they don't care, because they're evil geniuses, and all they care about is fat dubs and brand value and all the stupid shit. Shouldn't, it's important to understand how you get there, right? But clearly they don't give a shit over in the upper management. Fuck Nicole, fuck GamerDoc, fuck all those people at upper management, fuck Peak Six for doing this and not making any proper changes and allowing this to happen. Fuck them all, burn it to the ground. I want to keep the coaches and some of the players, obviously, but this management has to go. It's too bad. It's too atrocious to defend at this point. Not that I ever was a massive defender of it. Um, and yeah, so I think with that, guys, I'm so exhausted. I'm gonna call it for now. Maybe some of this stuff will get brought up again in 2 weeks' time. Again, I won't be recording an episode next week because I'm going on a vacation, from Friday to Monday, so I'm not going to be able to post a video. But I will be able to post one the following week, and we'll probably talk more about the CS:GO roster in particular. But obviously, many stuff could come out with EG's management in the next couple of weeks or so, and I hope it does happen, and I hope people talk about it and really emphasize it because guys, you can make a change, you can make a difference. It's it all comes down to just being vocal about it. Obviously not just spewing hate messages for the sake of hate messages, but being critical and pointing out their flaws and just generating that pressure, I think is massively important in potentially changing this organization for the better. And so while I don't think it will happen because signing the sponsorship deal with Chevron, I think in my opinion, after all of this information has come out, it just seems very distasteful. It seems like, yeah, listen, we understand the community saying all this shit, but like frankly, we don't give a fuck because like Riot's not going to do anything, Valve's not going to do anything, and so we'll just do whatever the fuck we want, and you can go fuck yourself, basically. Um, so yeah, crazy stuff. Again, if I miss something, I'll probably talk about it in 2 weeks' time, or if there's something new that comes out, I'll talk about it in 2 weeks' time. But for now, guys, I've been talking and rambling for about an hour and 41 minutes or so. I'm so exhausted I can't even think straight. So I'm sure I missed some stuff, but I hope you can forgive me for that. I will post Richard Lewis and Arsh Goyal's article in the description below, so please check those out. Highly recommend it. I would say check Richard's out first because that's how it was in chronological order. And thank you all for listening to the podcast. I'm sorry it's been a week off, but obviously after this next vacation in the following week, I'm hoping to be a little bit more consistent in the schedule, but we'll see. Thank you all for watching, and give it a like, give it a share, whatever, and talk about this situation. Talk about not just the Danny situation, but the whole situation with EG, because it's bad everywhere. So guess what? It's pretty easy to just point it out when EG's being dumb. So they love doing that. So I will see you guys in 2 weeks' time. Thank you for watching and listening.